This is the Dallas Morning News.
Hi, everyone. This is Dallas Morning News sports editor Tommy Mogelson. Before we get into the episode, I did need to offer a quick disclaimer that former Texas Ranger Pete Incaviglia was our guest today, and he had some audio problems, as we all know some people do. So there's some choppiness in his interview, so we asked you to bear with us in what was an enlightening interview. Thanks so much for listening, and again, please make sure you send all complaints directly to Evan Grant. Thanks again.
The Rangers break camp a week from tomorrow and return to Arlington, where they'll play a couple of exhibition games against the Royals before the season starts in earnest on Thursday, March 26th in Philadelphia. Thanks for joining us on this week's episode of SportsDay Rangers. I'm John Blake.
I'm still Evan Grant.
And Evan, where are those dog days they call it of spring training now? How are you feeling out there in Arizona? I notice you still have that painting behind you. Those same people are walking. They haven't made much progress in 5 weeks.
They're contemplating, John, just like they're contemplating the Rangers roster, like I am. They are the dog days of spring at this point, because you had about 2 weeks. The starting pitchers are starting to get lengthened out. This year, with so many guys away at the WBC, it doesn't even have the feel of like real exhibition games, because you're playing so many minor leaguers. So it's hard to evaluate, and I think it's hard for guys to really get their competitive juices flowing. It'll be interesting to see what happens over the final week out here.
So our guest this week will be Pete Incaviglia, and looking forward to talking to Inky. It was 40 years ago this year, 1986 in the spring, where Pete Incaviglia burst on the scene as a Texas Rangers player right out of Oklahoma State University, made the ball club, hit 30 home runs, and had an epic moment during spring training in Pompano Beach. And we'll ask Inky about that on the podcast. He had a long career, and now is a minor league manager managing Cleburne in the American Association. And then later, in the archives in Arlington, we're going to look back at the Rule 5 success of the Texas Rangers. They've got a player in camp this year that we'll talk about here in a minute, Carter Baumler, who's got a real good chance to make the club in the bullpen. So we'll see how he does, and that will be our archives in Arlington. But
you can reach out to each of us on X with any Rangers questions or comments. I'm at Evan_P_Grant, and John is, as always, at Ranger Blake.
Bottom of the ninth, bases loaded. Here comes Jimmy Dale from Baker Brothers Plumbing, AC, and Electrical.
Thanks, Chuck. When your home pitches curveballs, Baker Brothers knocks it out of the park.
Home run, Baker Brothers. Incredible.
As the official home service partner of your Texas Rangers, we're offering $300 off a tank or tankless water heater.
Another winning call. Visit callbakernow.com or dial 214-342-1171 today.
Baker Brothers.
Great service.
11, here we are now, almost 5 weeks into spring training. This is the third full week of games, I guess, now.
I mean, we're really at the midpoint of the schedule, of the spring schedule, John. Yeah.
So you're concerned. You've been writing a lot about the offense. Now, there are certainly questions in other areas, especially the bullpen, but the offense is certainly the key this year. And one big thing that Skip Schumacher has been talking about the last few days is the utilization of Evan Carter and Josh Smith against both right-handers and a lot of the time against left-handers. It almost sounds as like he would like to have as consistent a lineup each and every day as he possibly can. Is that fairly accurate for right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think that would be his ultimate goal. I think he's also very cognizant that he doesn't want Carter and Smith to be labeled platoon players. You know, the hard truth on all this is, given Carter's history with injuries and given Josh Smith's history with second half fall off, there's going to be some maintenance off days just to keep those guys fresh, much more than you would do, like, say, with a Corey Seager or in the past, obviously, a Marcus Semien. And so those off days are still going to come against lefties. So they'll they'll face some lefties. They're not going to face them all, but the idea would be to have these guys also believe that they are everyday players, that they're not pushed into some little, that they're not a peg in a hole, that they are guys who are capable of playing regardless of the circumstances. And the at-bats that they've taken against lefties, they haven't had a ton of result success, but it certainly does seem like they're hitting the ball hard. I think they're combined 1 for 12. That's obviously a really small sample size. It's an insignificant sample size, really. But they are hitting the ball harder, and their bats are competitive against left-handed pitching. And, Carter has the ability. Josh Smith does too, because he's a fairly disciplined hitter. They've got the ability to kind of compete or have a chance against the lefty by taking a walk.
Now, in Carter's case especially, Evan Carter doesn't play. That means a shift in defensive alignment in the outfield. You have to move Langford to center for the most probably and play Haggerty or whoever it is in left. Is that part of it too, that Skip is a little reticent to move Langford around, or is that not part of the equation?
No, I mean, I think he'd like to have consistency, and I think it's entirely possible that if you do go this route, that you do determine that you're going to start Evan Carter in center field and play him in center field. I think that, what the days that he gets off, and whether it's Sam Haggerty or whether it's Michael Hellman, whoever, I think that person may end up playing center field, so you're not moving Wyatt Langford around the outfield too much.
And looking at the move this past week of the signing of Andrew McCutchen to a minor league deal, brings another right-handed bat into camp, probably mostly as looking at it to get at bats at the designated hitter spot. Early impressions of McCutchen, and I know, again, I'm not one of these, you can spend your life at this point debating if he's Mark Canha versus Andrew McCutchen. Right now, they just want to see if McCutchen could be a possible fit.
Yeah, I mean, look, good on the Rangers for stepping out and making that offer. I think there was some thought that McCutchen might end up in an Atlanta uniform after the Profar suspension, but the Rangers made an offer before the Braves ever did. They get first look at him. They can have a conversation with him at the end of spring about potentially going to Round Rock for a couple of weeks as an insurance policy. He might have a major league offer at that point in time, or, he could put on a show here over these final 2 weeks, and given his track record and his history as an MVP, he might end up beating out Canha. But I think Canha's had a solid spring. I think that Canha is probably a little bit more equipped right now to play the outfield. He can also play a little bit of first base if needed. And it's hard to make up 2 weeks in spring training. So that might be a little bit of an issue, but the first impressions of McCutchen are really impressive. He's hit 2 balls for doubles. He's hit 3 of the 4 balls he's put in play in his first 2 games, over 100 miles an hour. He's taken counts to full. Even the 1 strikeout was, a full count. So I've been impressed, and he's given every reason to believe that he's got a real shot to compete over these final 10 days.
One other thing with the offense, Jake Berger has had a really good spring to this point. He's been in the cleanup spot now, and it looks like that's a place he could be on opening day. And if he continues to continues to perform this spring,
yeah, I think that I think Skip Schumacher is pretty much set on his first 4 guys, and he's said as much with Berger in the cleanup spot. I think the things that the Rangers are liking about Jake Berger right now are that he is doing damage on pitches in the strike zone, which is something that he didn't do very well last year. And his strikeout rate is down in spring training from where it was a year ago. His walk rate is up a little bit. He's hitting the ball extremely hard. So it's been, listen, when we talk about all the guys who are keys to this team rebounding, we've talked about Carter, we've talked about Berger. Josh Young has been hampered by the adductor muscle injury, should be back out there by the time this airs. and Jacques Peterson is a key. And you've had really, really encouraging springs from at least half of those guys. I think that you put down Josh Smith replacing Marcus Simeon, and you look at that spring, and it's been an encouraging sign. And across the board, John, I just want to point out a couple of numbers here that are from my column from Thursday morning's paper. But in spring training last year, this team struck out 23.9% of the time. This spring, it's down about a percentage point to 22.6. Where it really stands out is that last year they were chasing pitches outside the zone 32% of the time at this point in camp. This year it's down to 24.6%. That's a significant drop. And if you're making better swing decisions on pitches in the zone, you're going to be a much more dangerous hitter.
Well, let's talk about the bullpen. People, at this time of year, they love to speculate who's going to be at the end of the bullpen, but it looks like there is some room here in the Ranger bullpen, as many as 3 spots still up right now for grabs in that bullpen. Several young guys, Peyton Gray, Gavin Collier, the aforementioned Baumler. Could Josh Sborz be a factor? Is Crivello a factor? Or are they going to have to go out and get some help for the end of that bullpen?
Well, I think they've got to have, I think, as you say, there's probably, if you're including Baumler, there's probably 6 guys. It leaves room for 2 guys. One of those 2 guys, I think, has to be optionable because you've got to be able to shuttle a pitcher back and forth. So, I think that opens the roster possibilities for, and that really is kind of going to be your 8th reliever or your 7th reliever, depending on how you view Baumler. And so that guy doesn't necessarily, I don't know that let me rephrase all this. Gavin Collier's had a really good spring, and he's a really good prospect, and he throws really hard. I'm not sure in that role that's the best route for him to get to the big leagues. I think you'd like for him to have some more AAA innings. You'd like for him to have more regular work down there. You'd like for him to pitch in leverage situations down there. I think it opens up a path for somebody like Peyton Gray, who is a multi-inning pitcher, who's really kind of come out of nowhere this spring to have a very impressive spring thus far with, I think it's 12 strikeouts and no walks and no runs in 7+ innings. But it's all going to get much more interesting here over the next 10 days as guys from WBC teams start to filter back into their camps and the lineups get a little bit more full. But yeah, Crivello has options. Alexis Diaz has options. Collier obviously would have options if he's added to the 40. Peyton Gray would have options. So there's a good pool of guys fighting for that optionable piece. The other question is Josh Sborz at 93 miles an hour capable of pitching in a significant role in your bullpen, or does he need a little bit more time to get another mile or 2 on his fastball? And does he do that in the minor leagues? And if he does, then I do think you are in a position where you're really scouring other camps for guys who are on non-roster invites or who may end up on waivers here before the end of spring as a potential supplement. And look, we haven't even addressed closer because I don't think the Rangers are anywhere close to figuring out closer. They got to figure out some big pieces in the bullpen before they ever get there.
Well, the clock is ticking. There are a lot of decisions to be made. Well, it was 40 years ago, like I said, the spring training 1986. A lot of young players for a ball club that went on to win 87 games that year. A fun year. And one of the guys in the middle of that was an outfielder from Oklahoma State named Pete Incaviglia. And we'll talk to Pete on our next segment coming up next. Well, welcome back to our SportsDay Ranger podcast for this week. And we're happy to have Pete Incaviglia as our guest. 12-year Major League veteran with 6 teams, also played in Japan, Mexico, and the Atlantic League, 206 big league home runs. 5 years, his first 5 big league seasons with the Rangers, and we'll get into this. 20 more home runs each year, And I didn't know if you realized this, Pete, when you left the Rangers, you had 124 career home runs, and Evan, that was second on our all-time club list, to Larry Parrish at the time. You went directly from Oklahoma State University to the big leagues, and been a long-time independent league manager, and will start his third year as the manager of the Cleburne Railroaders in the American Association in 2026. So, Pete, let's just welcome to the show. We appreciate you joining us today. And let's just start there. We were talking a little bit before we started. I cannot believe it's been 40 years since Pompano Beach, and you came on the scene right out of college. And what was that spring training like for you in 1986?
Well, it was eye-opening, obviously, when you're playing with the best players in the world and, you're a 21-year-old punk kid just trying to mix in with all the veteran guys that you watched when you were a kid, like Charlie Huff and Buddy Bell and Jim Sundberg and Larry Parrish. And, the list goes on of all the great major leaguers and great Texas Rangers. I was a little in awe, so I tried to be quiet and just go about my job and try and learn from those guys as much as I could.
I wouldn't say you were cocky, but you were certainly very sure of your abilities because you came right out of college. You told Montreal you wanted to, you didn't want to go to the minor leagues, and then Rangers trade, and you were the starting left fielder on opening day. But so you came into that camp with a pretty good feeling you could be a big league player right off the bat, right?
Yeah, I felt pretty good, but that story is kind of misguided a little bit. I asked Montreal that I wanted to go to a major league training because I wanted to see how I measured up to major leaguers, and I would have never known that if the Rangers didn't give me the opportunity to go to big league spring training. I wasn't demanding to go to major league. I was demanding that I wanted to go to major league spring training and see how I measured up, and I felt I could hold my own after a few days being in camp with the Rangers. I felt good, being able to play at that level, and and Tom Steve really gave the opportunity to go out there and prove myself, and Sandy Johnson, who was at that time, really can't thank them enough for believe in me, give me the opportunity to go out there and realize my dream and become major leaguer.
Pete, it's funny to hear you talk about that Expos experience because that is kind of commonplace now, really, is that your first-round draft pick goes to big league camp the next year. The Rangers have invited, I don't know, any number of their first-round picks over the last 6 years to big league camp as non-roster players because they feel, I think exactly like you said, it's a great experience for those guys to be around the older players and get a better feel for what's involved in being a big leaguer. I just wonder, like, when you look at the game now, we do kind of see this resurgence of guys who are going from college very quickly through the minor leagues and into the big leagues, and some guys with no minor league experience at all. It does seem like everything comes full circle in the game, doesn't it? What do you think about the game and how they're integrating young players now?
I think it's fantastic. I mean, all young players are going to have to go through a learning curve before they get to the major leagues. The only way that young players are going to figure out they can belong, if they can figure out if they belong in the big leagues, they're going to have to actually go out and play games. And they're going to struggle. I mean, really the only guy that I never saw struggle was Barry Bonds. The rest of us, there was a learning curve. I'll give you an example. I really struggled in April. I was really struggling probably 2 or 3 weeks into the season, and I was probably hitting $179, and but I was learning and I was getting better, and my confidence, wasn't getting any lower when I was playing. And so I remember we were in Toronto, and Bobby invited me to dinner, and they wanted to send me down. And I told Bobby, I said, Bobby, I'm dead. Just give me a couple more weeks. That's all I ask. I'm getting. And he came around, and I think I hit like 400 in May, and the rest is history. But, you have to get young players. If you think young players can play in the big leagues, you have to get the big leagues, because they have to go through that learning curve and give them the opportunity to fail for a little bit. But you have to see them continue to get better and not lose confidence. The biggest thing with young players is you don't want to crush their confidence, in the first couple of weeks.
So you're talking about being a young player for that 1986 team, which is one of the most fun teams I've ever been around in my baseball career. And we had a very young pitching staff with Bobby Witt and Mitch Williams and Edwin Correa, and Ruben Sierra came up that season, and you also had a good veteran mix. So how did that go for a young player? I'm sure it helped to have some other young guys on the team, but also, like you were talking, a lot of good veterans as well.
Yeah, Charlie Huff and Toby Harris earlier, Ryan. We also had a bunch of guys, which was we could lean on each other. We had a Jose Guzman and Bobby, guys that that you could share the same experiences with, going through the same trials and tribulations. I was to have those young guys to lean on, but it was also to have those veteran guys in the training room who were great guys, willing to give you information to make you better. Hey, why'd you swing at that slider? Why are you swinging that ball above up? And you continue to get better. You learn a lot from guys in the clubhouse, and the player to have those veterans in the clubhouse.
Well, Pete, you've had a long career as a minor league manager in independent baseball, which I had a chance to work in for a couple of years in the Northern League, and I really enjoyed working in indie baseball because the teams really do try to win, and it is so competitive. In 2022, you had the opportunity to have a young pitcher by the name of Kumar Rocker pitch for you in Tri-City for, I think he made 5 starts. What were your impressions of him then? And I'm sure you've had a chance to kind of follow his progression the last couple of years, and now he's battling for a position in the Rangers rotation in 2026. So what were your early impressions of Kumar?
A humble person. First, I really loved he ingratiated himself into the clubhouse with his mates. And the work ethic was just amazing to me, how hard he worked every day at his craft. The thing that was kind of eye-popping to me was how good a command he had of that breaking ball. Everybody knew he threw hard. It was 97, 98. Just came to the breaking ball that was, amazing. He wanted for a strike. Everything was there. I mean, I don't know why, the Mets, vetoed his draft that year. I know they said he was hurt, but I mean, he was lights out for me. Just a incredible, what's the word I'm looking for? When he was on the mound, his mound presence was great. Incredible. The thing that was incredible about him was how he loved to compete. And I could see if he gave up a hard hit baseball, you could see he'd up a little bit. That competitive edge would get going in his veins. And I really loved him. Everybody thought he wasn't going to be a first round pick. And I said, that stuff with that breaking ball, his mound presence and the will to compete, it was kind of a no-brainer for me. I'm so glad the Rangers took him in the first round.
Well, I can't believe it's been 40 years, and I've told the story over and over about that afternoon in Pompano Beach when Bobby Valentine's throwing you batting practice. and you hit the ball. First you hit it off him. I remember that. You turned and hit him straight in the back with a line drive, and Valentine was so pumped. And then the next, like 2 pitches later, he hits this ball through the left field fence in Pompano. And that kind of just put Pete Incaviglia on the map for Ranger fans. It was a fun spring, and I remember taking people out there all spring, Evan, and showing people the hole in the wall.
He's only told me that story about 3 times a year, Pete.
Well, that story gets a little bigger every year. It's like, it's like that fish story when you go and catch the bass. That bass gets bigger every year.
I love it. It's a great one. It's a great story. It was a great way to kind of end the time in Pompano Beach.
Well, in the archives at Arlington for this episode, we're going to continue kind of with the beginning of season and spring training and all of that kind of thing by looking back at the Rangers Rule 5 draft success and how players they drafted the previous December, what kind of success they've had. And this is induced to Carter Baumler's spring a little bit. And Evan, the Rangers really have not had a very successful Rule 5 selection make the club as a pitcher and then stick for the whole season. The only one that has ever happened to was right-handed pitcher Odell Jones. Back in 1983 for the Rangers, he was selected in the 82 Rule 5 draft, and he had some big league time previously. He won 3 games, had 10 saves, pitched 42 games for that 1983 Rangers team, which actually was in first place at the All-Star break and totally collapsed in the second half, and the White Sox went on to steamroll the AL West that year. But you'll remember some of these other famous Ranger pitchers, Rule 5 picks that made the club out of spring training. And here is the list. You don't remember right-handed pitcher Ramon Mañon. This was 1990. Drafted from the Yankees, pitched 1 game with the Rangers. The only game he ever pitched in the majors, went back to the Yankees. You will remember in 2005, lefty Fabio Castro, who was selected in a Rule 5 draft, pitched in 4 games with Texas. And if I remember correctly, the manager and the general manager were really not on the same page with old Fabio, and he was traded to Philadelphia on June 29th.
Yeah, I do remember the Fabio Castro story, and I do think that was kind of the beginning of the end for the John Daniels, Buck Showalter relationship, because John wanted him to pitch, and the Rangers had him. They wanted him used, and Buck didn't trust him. Buck was not a fan of bringing along a kid in development for when he thought, I guess, that this team was competing and they had holes in the bullpen. And so it became kind of a standoff. And, I do remember a night in Tampa Bay where Fabio got up to warm up, suddenly sat down, and then ended up on the IL not too long after. And that was kind of the last straw. I think there was some supposition that maybe that wasn't even a real injury and that it was just being used to create a roster spot. But whatever the outcome there, yeah, Fabio Castro's time with the Rangers had come to an end.
Many people will not remember that the first Rangers team to go to the World Series in 2010 had on its opening day roster right-hander Mason Tobin, who pitched in 4 games that year and then ended up on the DL for the rest of the season, and we never saw Mason again. No. Then in 2016, we had right-handed pitcher Mike Hochschild, who also pitched in 4 games to an ERA of about 11 and was sent back to his original team, Houston, in late May. And then finally, we had Brent DeGus in 2020, was drafted 2021, 8.44 ERA in 19 games. The Rangers DFA'd him. He was actually claimed by Arizona and went on to bounce around and pitch for 4 or 5 teams. So it is not a illustrious list, to say the least, from the pitching standpoint.
On the pitching side, though, there was a position player in Delino DeShields
By
that
far the
ended up
best.
having a fine career with the Rangers.
By far the best year. Drafted in 2014 from the Astros. Played 121 games in 2015 with 25 steals. And who will also forget the last player to play the whole year with the Rangers in 2018, the immortal Carlos Tocci, an outfielder who played in 66 games for the 2018 Rangers with a total of 5 RBIs and a .225 average, and he couldn't even run and steal bases. And old Carlos was long gone by the start of the 19th season.
Yeah, I found Carlos Tocci to be a curious case in keeping him on the roster all that year.
And the only other two I'm going to point out, because these two were actually very valuable players for the Rangers. The Rangers did draft in 1984 a wild lefty from San Diego by the name of Mitch Williams, who tried to throw batting practice in spring training in 1985 in Pompano, and guys wouldn't even get in the cage against him. They were so afraid they were going to hit him in the head. Well, by 1986, Mitch had become made the ball club the next year. The Rangers made a trade, kept him in the organization. 1986, as a rookie, pitched in 80 games and won 8 games, went on to a long major league career. And then 2 years later, Cecil Espy was drafted in 1986. We got him back in a trade from the Pirates after he didn't make the club in 87. And he had 30 total steals for the Rangers in 88 and 89. But it hasn't been a great history, but there have been some interesting guys, and we'll see what Carter Baumler can do. If Carter Baumler keeps progressing here and makes the opening day roster. One guy the Rangers did send back, they could have probably kept, if you remember, was Jordan Romano, who went on to have a pretty good career as a closer for the Blue Jays.
Yep. Yeah, I mean, it's always a crapshoot when you take a Rule 5 pick, and you have to kind of be in a certain position. It's why I think there are some challenges to keeping Carter Baumler all year this year. The Rangers intend to contend, and it becomes a real tenuous situation when you start to run short of pitching and you've got a guy that you can't send down who's not pitching very frequently. So we'll see how this plays out. There's also the possibility when you do offer a guy back in the Rule 5 draft, as the rule states, you could potentially make a trade for him there and avoid all of that.
Like the Rangers did with Williams and Espy, and those two trades worked out pretty well. So that's this week's Archives in Arlington, and we thank you for joining us on this week's episode of SportsDay Rangers.
Keep up with my coverage of spring training online and in the Dallas Morning News. We were just on YouTube Live this week again. We will be on there next week as well. We will have a special section coming out before the season this year, a big Rangers preview, which we're looking forward to having in print. And I'm looking forward to hearing all your suggestions and feedback.
We always like that special section, and we're glad it keeps coming out. They keep cranking it out year after year. So with that, we will see you all next week.